What if the secret to success wasn't just talent or hard work, but unshakable confidence? Welcome to Grasp Confidence, the podcast where visionary thought leaders, speakers, and entrepreneurs unlock the mindset and strategies for lasting success. I'm your host, Tara LaFawn Gooch, CEO, two-time best-selling author, and international TEDx speaker, and I can't wait to help you step into the most powerful version of yourself. Let's dive in. Today's guest on Grasp Confidence podcast is someone who truly lives and leads with heart. Nathan Caldwell is an inspirational leadership speaker, best-selling author of Empowering Kindness, and a powerful voice reminding us that kindness is not just a nice to have. It's actually a superpower. With a thriving career as a cybersecurity marketing leader and a mission rooted in faith, family, and compassion, Nathan believes that we are designed to be kind, and he's built a movement around that truth. From corporate boardrooms to keynote stages, Nathan inspires others to embrace authority, autonomy, and the ability to lead with kindness. His work has impacted thousands, and if you check out his website, empoweringkindness.com, and his engaging videos on YouTube, you will see what I mean. Nathan, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here. I appreciate the invite to be with you and your audience.
Absolutely. Well, kindness, it's not just about being kind to others. It's also about being kind to ourselves, right? So as we think about personal and even professional development, kindness, like I said in the intro, is not just a nice to have. It's not something we check off and say, okay, I've done my kindness today, right? I've done my gratitude today. It's something that is a leadership superpower, leadership multiplier. And if we incorporate this in our daily lives, not only will we be better equipped to lead others, but also ourselves. What do you think about that?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's helpful also to understand really what we mean by kindness. It's not about just being nice and getting other people to like you or I'm Canadian, and so the joke is like I'll always use my manners and I'll always say sorry and I'll hold the door for way too long for people as they're coming up to a building. Uh, but that's not necessarily what we're talking about. What we're talking about when I look at kindness, it's being able to recognize needs in others and then using your strength or wisdom, your bravery to fulfill that need for others. And it's not always about doing it for them. It's about equipping them so they can do it for themselves. And so that's where true leadership comes into play with this idea of kindness, is that you're always looking for opportunities to grow another person, and you're trying your absolute best with all of the wisdom and experience that you have to then better equip them so they can stand on by themselves and be able to do it themselves.
Wow, it's powerful. It reminds me of a saying: if you give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. If you teach a man to fish, teach a man to fish, he'll eat for a lifetime, right?
Yeah, and I use that phrase in my book, and then I jokingly take it a step further. It's like, well, then also teach them to teach others to fish. Like, don't just stop with, oh, are they able to now provide for themselves? It's about having that mentality of growing others around you. That's what truly makes you a leader. I have a short story that I wrote about an apple orchard, and there's like a selfish apple tree who just wants to keep all of its fruit to itself and not share it out. And when the apples fall to the ground, they grow up underneath his shadow, and they never really develop very well because he wants to keep them close to him. He wants that control over them. Meanwhile, the other apple trees who have a different mentality of let's get our seeds planted further out in the orchard where they can get the sunlight, where they can grow on their own and get all they need. And there's this one telling moment at the end of the story where the one apple tree who allowed his seeds to go out and grow says to the one who was kind of selfish, You were in the you growing business. I was in the orchard business. And that's the mentality that I try to pass on to others whenever I'm speaking about leadership. It's that growing of others is the true success.
Wow, I love that analogy. It's so powerful, right? And such a great picture to put this all into perspective. But I I want to, rewind a little bit
Mhm.
because, today you're this inspirational author, you've got this amazing book, you're a speaker, you're, helping people become better leaders and versions of themselves. But I have to ask, was it always this way? Was there ever a point when you didn't feel aligned with kindness in some kind of way, or was it always this important to you?
It's always been this important to me because as a kid, my dad was a mailman and he would know everybody on his route. And he was just somebody who embodied selfless kindness. And so constantly he would come home from work and change into some like ripped up jeans or whatever, paint splattered t shirt, grab a toolbox, grab me, and then go back out. And I would just get put to work alongside him, helping some older people on his route that couldn't do for themselves. And it was not as though he had like a side hustle as a handyman. He just would do that out of the nature of his heart. And he was always very giving. And he's still that way. And so it just was something where I learned very hands on and now as a dad, I'm looking at my kids and I'm seeing that those shoulder to shoulder moments are the way they truly learn. They don't learn just from me sitting back at the house and telling them, like, go out and rake the neighbor's yard. It's when they take the ownership upon themselves, then after having experienced it and it's demonstrated and you coach them through it, then my son has come to me. He's like, hey, can I go across the street and help our neighbor? He's out in his yard. And we're like, yes, please go do that. And my wife and I breathe a sigh of relief that our kids like turning out okay. So, and when we think of leaders in that position too, is to view yourself as that coach, to make sure that you're setting your people up for success, that you are demonstrating. If you have a very specific vision on what you want it to be, what you want the outcome to be, make sure you're clarifying that. The phrase that is used a ton is to be unclear is to be unkind. If you're just telling people, hey, get the job done, but you have something specific in mind that you want it to be, and you never reveal that to them, like you aren't setting them up for success. You're setting them up to fail because then it's just a matter of guesswork as to trying to figure out what exactly triangulate. Well, what do you want? And that can kind of handcuff people from being able to be successful.
Yes, I completely agree. So it sounds like, leadership, according to Nathan Caldwell, is rooted in service.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think of it in this way too, that I mentioned earlier that kindness is that idea of using our experience, our wisdom, our bravery to help equip others. And there's sometimes, we can go through difficult times in our lives where we can serve that up to others. And it may be an emotional or painful like moment of revisiting those times, but then it becomes a parable or a valuable lesson to the person that we choose to share it with, to say, look, I don't want you making the same mistakes I've done. Let's time travel you past this. And sometimes though, sometimes people have to make mistakes for themselves to really like land the message and really gain that valuable lesson. But it's very important that as we look at others, we're looking for those opportunities to help them through difficult situations by using what we've been through previously.
Absolutely. And, before we went on air here, you and I were having a separate conversation about grasp. GRASP, gratitude, responsibility, action, site, purpose. And a couple of those letters really stood out to you. So you mentioned
Yeah.
gratitude and you mentioned purpose. I would like to hear a little bit about gratitude and, your philosophy with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm a firm believer in faith, and I grew up when I was a little kid. One of my favorite hymns was "Count Your Many Blessings,
Yeah.
Name Them One by One." And when my kids were little, and we would be driving in the van, and you know, the mood wouldn't be so hot at the moment, uh, we'd change the tone. And I'd say, let's play a game. It's called My Three Favorite Things. List your three favorite animals. And we'd pick a category. And the mood would immediately shift. And when I was doing a lot of research for my book on the power of kindness, what I found was like psychologists and multiple studies show that we can't uh, be live and in person with two different emotions at once. And so if we start talking about positive things and counting our blessings and actually naming them one by one and like saying them out loud or writing them down, it actually pushes out some of the negativity that we feel in our lives. And so then what happens is if we have that gratitude, it puts us in a better position mentally to also then be able to pour into others. Like if we're grateful for the opportunities that we have, I go through this exercise sometimes when I'm speaking in front of an audience. And I'll say, I'll put up a slide that has that phrase, common sense is not so common. And so many people are like, oh, yeah, I work with tons of morons, right? They're so happy to like really just indulge
Mm.
that idea. And so I'll have people say, all right, well, close your eyes. And I want you to think back and let's actually do it together. Okay. Let's close our eyes. So close your eyes. All right. Think back to a time when somebody took the time to be with you and teach you about something you didn't know how to do. So you're working on something, you don't know how to do it, or you're hitting a brick wall, and somebody took the time to teach you how to do it. All right, open your eyes. Hey, did you have an individual in mind? Did you have a moment in mind?
I did. Yes.
Okay, and what was it, if you don't mind sharing?
Well, it was going back to faith. So there's been plenty of times in my life where I felt stuck or unsure or, just foggy about what the next steps would be, whether if that was my own life or with, professional life. And I remember leaning on a mentor to help guide me and actually took the time to teach me. And it was really nice.
So guess what that person didn't do? They didn't say, "Phew, I guess common sense is not so common," and walk away from you.
That's right.
Right? They saw like, "Oh, you don't know this area yet, or you're not comfortable in this area yet." Well, what they do, they took the time to be your teacher, to be your coach, to be your mentor. And so what I challenge people is if you ever have that thought where you're with somebody and you're like, man, they're just not getting it. Man, common sense is not so common. Well, you have a responsibility then to be patient, just like somebody else was for you, and teach them in that moment. And so that gratitude then that you feel toward the person who took patience to teach you, and now that lives on for the rest of your life, like that person is in heroic status with you, right? Because of what they did for you to have that patient moment to teach you. Guess what? You become that heroic status for that other person. And no matter how insignificant it is, we use the phrase, oh, it's like riding a bike, as if like, we use that phrase in conjunction or like to convey something that we just never forget. And it's so easy and it's tricky at first, but then it comes natural. We just take for granted that you know how to ride a bike then for the rest of your life. Well, if you think back to the person who taught you to ride that bike, like it's such a beautiful moment that they had to have patience with you and they had to pick you up and like brush off your knees when you scrape them and console you and pour into you to
Mm.
then have that with you for the rest of your life. And so there's moments where, we'll look at it. I spoke for a theme park a couple years ago, and then I revisited. They had me back in January to speak again. And the general manager, he was like, "Yeah, there was Nathan. That common sense is not so common. When you talk about that, he's like, a light bulb went off in my head because I had an employee who came in and I literally had to teach them how to sweep a floor. They just didn't know. And like your eyebrows, they go up in surprise. Like, how could someone not know how to sweep a floor? And we get this, I don't know, like self righteous
Mm.
attitude of like, oh, how could they not know something so simple? But we have to remind ourselves everybody has a different background. And that person who may not have ever been challenged to sweep a floor, maybe they have a different area of skills that we have not been exposed to.
That's
And
right.
so we have to make sure that we have that gratitude for those who have taught us so that we step into that role and aren't so like self-righteous and thinking like, what's wrong with this person that they don't know what I know? Like, have that patience, take the time to teach them, be that leader who gives them that shoulder to shoulder time to coach them through. And then you become elevated in their mind. They become, they have gratitude then for you and what you did for them.
Absolutely. I'm a firm believer in this. When I was a new entrepreneur, I didn't know what I was doing. Right. And I honestly wasn't aware of my purpose or skill sets. I really didn't know what I was great at. And I sat back and I observed, and I would look for people who could potentially use my help. And I was on LinkedIn at the time. I remember that. I'm always on LinkedIn, but I was on LinkedIn and I would see people that maybe didn't understand how to develop content that really resonated, but
Mhm.
they had a good message and a good heart. So I reached out to them to help them. Or maybe they didn't have, a personal brand and it was holding them back. And I would reach out and help. One of the things that I realized through this, and again, through kindness, through service, was it'll teach you how many things you're actually good at that
Mm.
other people take, that other people just have no idea about. Just like what you're saying, common sense is not so common. To me, these things came naturally, they came easy. But to other people, right? They were a mystery. They were hard. They were difficult and challenging. And it taught me a lot about other people, but most importantly, it taught me a lot about myself. And when I started approaching people with kindness and service, it actually helped me be aligned with my purpose.
Mhm.
What do
Mhm.
you think about that?
Oh, absolutely. You don't know how much weight you can lift until you start lifting weights. You will discover, like Dolly Parton says it amazingly, find out who you are and do it on purpose. But
Mm.
you don't find it out by just sitting there and thinking about it. You try different things. And I'm a firm believer in we discover more about ourselves when we serve others, and we discover more about our strength when we put ourselves to use. We discover more about what we can do in service to others if we serve others only, not just by like thinking about it. We have to put it into practice.
Yes, it's so powerful, right? So this is obviously, great for leaders of organizations, but it's good for anybody to practice, and everybody should practice this. When we are in service to others, you know, it's it's elevating them, but it's actually elevating ourselves too. We become that master of that subject, we in their eyes, right? We become their mentor, their teacher, their guide. And ultimately, just as you said in the beginning, that person may remember you for a very long time in a lovingly and fond way. This is what it's really meant to be a leader. This is a
Oh,
tenet of
yeah.
leadership, right? It's in being living in service to others. And, you're a person of faith. So I'll say this. If we look at the ultimate servant leader, the ultimate example, who do we think of? We think of Jesus,
Oh, absolutely.
right?
Yeah. Hmm.
He came from a divine place and, you know, was in a family that they weren't the richest, right? They were carpenter. His
Yeah.
father was a carpenter, right? His earthly father. So we think about that. And then he was such a devoted servant to people. Um, Another interesting thing we think about too is that Jesus never performed a miracle and tested the devil. He only did it in service to the people.
Hmm. Hmm.
And he could have all day long, right? He could have tested the devil and batted back and forth and said, "Here's a miracle. I'm going to disprove you." But he never did.
Right.
He
Right.
used that power in service to others. That's true leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. And he did it, in the face of adversity as well. Like he knew that many of the miracles he performed would give him backlash from the surrounding community. But he did it anyway because he started saying even when he was 12 years old to his own parents when they were all traveling and he stayed back while he was like speaking to the religious leaders and everything. And when they got him, they were like, Where were you? What were you doing?" And he's like, "Well, didn't you know I needed to be about my father's business?" And there's another verse that says, Ephesians 2:10 says, "We God created us, and He created good works that we should walk in them." And so when we think about our purpose, we aren't out here performing miracles, and we might look at Jesus and say, "Well, He was perfect, and He was God's only Son, like God in the flesh. There's no way I could live up to that." However, we've been designed by God to do good works. And we begin to like going back to that idea before where we discover more about ourselves and what we're capable of if we're about our Father's business. If we put ourselves in service to these good works. And like I said before, you don't know how much weight you can lift until you start lifting weights. And guess what? The more you lift, the more you can do and the easier the lighter weights become. But then also you get into this pattern or this mentality of I enjoy this. I like working out. I like the challenge. I want to do more for others. And so it's not easy work. How many times does it get messy when you're trying to help other humans, especially get through challenges or struggles or you go to somebody and you think, "Hey, I'm going to coach them, I'm going to help them." And then they reject it or they don't want it and they're like upset, and you're like, "Oh, well, sorry, I didn't mean to step on your toes. I'm just trying to be helpful. I've been in your shoes before and want to be of service to you." So it can get sticky and messy. This is not advice to say this is how you make your life so easy. Just be kind to everyone. Like you also, when I was talking earlier about sometimes the way we help others is by pulling from tough situations we've been through. And so there's this element of vulnerability as well when we sit down with people and we say, "Look, hey, I've been through this before. This is what happened to me. These are the mistakes I made." And now we're exposing ourselves to be either judged or maybe that person was like, we worry, "Oh, they were looking up to me. I'm so well liked." And now if I tell them that I made mistakes in the past, they aren't going to think of me as much of a leader. But it's those leaders who are vulnerable and demonstrate they care first that then are able to tap people on the shoulder and say, "Hey, can we talk for a second? There's an area where I see you could improve." And if they know we care first, then they're going to be like, "Yeah, absolutely." And if we're vulnerable with them, they're going to be vulnerable with us as well and say, "Oh, I've just been struggling." And they'll be a little more transparent about exactly what their struggle is, rather than deflecting to just say, "Oh, I just haven't had time this week, but I'll get it done. I just needed to a little more focus. I got to buckle down." Like they use all the corporate speak to kind of deflect what's truly going on. And
Yeah.
so having that vulnerability with people, understanding that's going to get messy. That's where we really get to those points of being able to help others, though.
Yes, I agree with you so much. And, this is a part of my new book, which is coming out this year. The responsibility we have in as leaders, right? To bridge even the start of a conversation or a meeting with kindness. And there's a science behind that. The interesting thing is, even though we're all different people, physiologically, our brains are the same, right? So when we, let's say a manager or leader approaches someone and it's, you need to get this done today, Nathan. Why didn't you get this done yesterday? This should have been done. This was this past due, and this has resulted. You're going to go into fight or flight mode. And what is the first thing you're going to think? You're going to think, I don't have a job, right? And now you're going to go into scarcity mindset, and it's going to be a snowball effect. The
Mhm.
best way to bridge a conversation is through kindness and through gratitude. And you can say to somebody, "Hey, Nathan, you're doing a really good job at this project. I'm really impressed with the speed you're doing it at. Have you considered it this way? All I've done was guide them, and I didn't tell them they need to do something, right? Because as soon as you tell somebody they need to do, they shrivel up and they retreat. Have you ever thought about doing it this way? Now I'm actually having a conversation instead of a command." And the science says that regardless of, again, our brains are physiologically the same. When we say something to another person, it goes through our ear, enters the base of our brain, travels through the limbic system, which is our emotional center of our brain. In other words, people feel first.
Mhm.
Then it goes to the logical center of our brain, which is our prefrontal cortex. Then you can think logically, but you can't think logically until you feel, right? So this is important to recognize. This is actually leadership science at work. This is, has profound implications on the way we lead and grow our companies. And, we can look at the stats and they're staggering.
Oh, absolutely.
Staggering,
Absolutely.
right? Right? You
Mhm.
look at large companies, you go on glassdoor.com, you see the retention rates, you see the employee reviews, and then you know what else correlates with that? Customer satisfaction rates. And everything stems from this, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I often talk about the the scarcity of positive speak in the
Yes.
workplace. There's a stat that we hear about 140,000 to 210,000 words per week.
Wow.
Out of that 140,000 to 210,000 words per week, how often would you say an employee receives a positive comment?
We're talking about word count or percentage?
I'm saying like a statement. So, out say a sentence is like 7 to 10 words, maybe
Mm,
maybe longer.
okay. So
But you're getting 140,000 to 210,000 words per week, and that's from all sources. But if you think about, a job, you're working 5 days a week, you're working, let's say the average is 40 hours a week, and how many words you encounter, how many statements would you say, though, are positive comments toward an employee on average?
1 to 2.
Okay.
Be
Here's
generous.
here's the shocking truth. You have a 30% chance of getting one positive statement per week.
Wow.
That's it. And then when you take a look, okay, well, let's say, let's talk about negative to positive. How many positive comments are required to even just equal out or, net zero a negative comment? It's 5 to 1. So you're like really digging a hole. You want to talk about like burnout in a job, like positivity depletion is just constantly ongoing. Because if we put it into those realms, like you work hard all week and no one says a good thing about it, like that's discouraging. You only have a 30% chance of getting that one comment. Well, in a week, how often are you going to get a negative comment?
Yeah.
Chances are highly, because there's a phrase I love: doers make mistakes. So the more you do, the more you're going to like, oh, hey, I did all this 90% of the way, 10% a little off because it was our first time trying it and it didn't quite work out to the what we had hoped, but whatever. So you have this imbalance of positivity, this depletion. And so when I speak to audiences, I often encourage people to think of a different type of compliment sandwich. Are you familiar with the compliment sandwich?
I'm
What
not
what is
familiar with the compliment sandwich. Please lay it on me.
Okay, so the traditional compliment sandwich is, if you need to give somebody some bad news or some coaching or something negative, they say give them a positive compliment, then give them the coaching or the negativity, and then give another positive. So it's like the meat is sandwiched between the bread. And I say, don't do that at all. I say, be inspired by one of the best sandwiches ever invented, the Oreo cookie sandwich, which is cookie, great, ice filling, even better, and then another cookie, it's great again. And so you build up this reputation of catching people doing good, of noticing all of their contributions, of being somebody who sees all the work that they are doing. It doesn't go unnoticed because you're constantly saying, hey, I saw what you did there. I really like that. That was really helpful. Great idea. We didn't solve that before, and now you have solved it. And getting very specific with them over what they've done. If you do that and you set up a culture of noticing the good, of noticing the accomplishments, then when you do need a coaching session and you say, hey, can we just have a chat? And you leave it on its own. Don't lure them in with a trap like, hey, let me tell you something good about yourself. Oh, by the way, smack. And then pat them on the back on the way out to soften the blow with another compliment. Like, that's trickery. And so instead, build up a reputation of noticing all that they do and communicating that to them. And then when you do have that moment where you do need to coach them or they need to improve on something, and you say, hey, can we talk a second? I'm noticing something where you could improve. Or I noticed that you fell short in this one area. Let's talk it through. How receptive are they? Oh, absolutely. Yes, because they want to get back into that status. It's not manipulation. It's 100, it's being more honest with someone rather than only focusing on the pieces where they're falling short. But you're being upfront with all the good they're doing too. And so it's a much more powerful relationship to help people grow, because then too, they know you truly care. They know that you've seen them do good in all areas. They know that you care about them. And so there's no confusing motivation about why you're pulling them in to have a discussion about an area they could improve upon, because the only motivation you have is you care about them. And it just becomes a great environment that you've set up for your people to succeed.
I love that. Nathan, what a powerful episode and timeless wisdom that we can all learn from. What are the best places to find you? Where can we find you and learn more about your work?
Yeah, so I have a website, empoweringkindness.com. Also, I'd love to connect with people on LinkedIn. And then also feel free to shoot me an email, just nathan@empoweringkindness.com. And I'd love to have any further conversations with anyone. And thank you so much for having me. I always love to have conversations about this topic. I love so much learning about your topic as well and the things that you're sharing with your audience. I think it's fantastic.
Oh, thank you so much. Wonderful. Well, we couldn't have this show without our amazing guests like Nathan, without our amazing listeners and supporters like you. So if you found this episode helpful, please like, share, subscribe, and don't forget to leave a review so we can keep growing and learning together. Nathan, it was an absolute pleasure. We will see you guys on the next episode. Take care.